What would you do if your husband asked for a divorce while his mistress was still in your bed? Most women would cry. Most women would beg. Most women would fall apart. But Jessica Morgan did something different. She kept a secret. A secret that would destroy everything her billionaire husband thought you knew. 9 months later, she walked into that divorce meeting carrying something no one expected. And when Marcus Whitmore saw what she was holding, his face turned white. His mistress stopped smiling. His lawyers went silent. What happened next would send a billionaire to prison, expose a family empire built on lies, and prove that the most dangerous person in any room is a woman with nothing left to lose. This is not just a story about betrayal. This is a story about a mother who burned down an empire to save her daughter. If stories about justice, revenge, and women who refuse to be silenced speak to your soul, you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and stay until the very end, because trust me, you will not see this ending coming. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Jessica Morgan. I was 28 years old when I met him at a charity gala in downtown Cleveland. I was there representing my company, a mid-sized marketing firm where I had worked my way up from entry-level assistant to senior account manager in just 5 years. I was proud of that. Proud of the life I was building with nothing but my own determination and a degree from Ohio State that I had paid for myself, one student loan payment at a time. Marcus Whitmore was the keynote speaker that night, 32 years old, impossibly handsome, heir to one of the largest real estate development companies in the Midwest. When he approached me at the cocktail hour, I genuinely thought he had mistaken me for someone else. "You look like you would rather be anywhere but here," he said, that famous smile lighting up his face. I laughed, caught off guard by his directness. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way, these events are necessary, but they are not exactly stimulating. "I am Marcus, by the way." "I know who you are," I said. "Everyone knows who you are. But I do not know who you are. And that is far more interesting to me. Looking back now, I can see how calculated that moment was. How perfectly he had read my insecurity, my surprise that someone like him would notice someone like me. He made me feel special, chosen, like I was the only person in that crowded ballroom who truly understood him. That was his gift, making women feel like they were the only ones who truly saw him, the real him, the man behind the billion-dollar empire. I did not realize until much later that he showed that same real him to dozens of women over the years. We all thought we were special. We were all just temporary distractions. But I am getting ahead of myself. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. 8 months of whirlwind romance, private jets to Paris, weekends at his family's estate in the Hamptons. He introduced me to a world I had only read about in magazines, and I was intoxicated by all of it, by him. By the way he looked at me, like I was precious. By the way he said my name like it was a prayer. But when he asked me to marry him on a private beach in Maui with the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I said yes without hesitation. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. I did not realize I was being collected, not chosen. And the changes started small, the way these things always do, so small that I did not even notice them at first. Or maybe I noticed, but convinced myself they did not matter, that this was just what marriage was like, that compromise meant becoming smaller to fit into someone else's life. 3 months after the wedding, my company offered me a promotion, Director of Client Services. It was everything I had worked for, the culmination of 7 years of late nights and early mornings, and proving myself over and over again. I was so excited to tell Marcus. I practiced the words on the drive home, imagining his face lighting up with pride. Instead, he frowned. "That sounds like a lot of travel," he said carefully. "A lot of late nights. I am not sure that is the best thing for us right now. We are trying to build a life together, Jessica. Do you really want to spend it in airports and conference rooms?" I tried to explain that it was not that much travel, that I could manage my schedule, that this was important to me. But every argument I made, he had a counter-argument. He was not angry. He was never angry. He was just concerned, worried about our relationship, worried about my stress levels, worried about me. By the end of the conversation, I had convinced myself that he was right, that turning down the promotion was my choice, my decision, my sacrifice for the good of our marriage. I told my boss the next day that I was not interested in the position. She looked at me like I had grown a second head. "Jessica," she said slowly, "you have been working toward this for years. Are you sure?" "I am sure," I said. "My husband and I talked about it and we decided that now is not the right time." We decided, as if I had any say in it at all. That was just the beginning. Over the next 6 years, I disappeared piece by piece, like a photograph left in the sun, fading so gradually that you do not notice until one day you look and there is nothing left but a blank space where a person used to be. I missed my father's funeral because Marcus had a business trip to Tokyo that he absolutely could not attend alone. My father had been sick for months, pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 3 weeks, and they were generous in that estimate. He died on a Tuesday. I was 30,000 feet in the air, somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, smiling at Japanese investors. While my heart broke into pieces, I am still trying to put back together. I called my mother from the hotel room that night, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. "You should be here," she said. Her voice was hollow with grief and something else. Disappointment, maybe, or the beginning of the distance that would eventually become an unbridgeable gap between us. "Your father asked for you at the end. He wanted to say goodbye." "I know," I whispered. "I know. I am so sorry. I could not get away. Marcus needed me here. Marcus needed you." My mother repeated the words like she was tasting something bitter. "And what about what your father needed? What about what you needed?" I did not have an answer for her then. I still do not have one now. When I got back from Tokyo, Marcus was sympathetic. He held me while I cried. He told me he understood, that grief was difficult, that he was there for me. But when I mentioned wanting to fly back for the memorial service, his sympathy developed conditions. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "you know I have the Henderson meeting next week. I cannot possibly reschedule it. And you know how important it is for us to present a united front at these things. The Henderson specifically asked to meet you. What about the memorial?" My voice sounded small even to my own ears. "We can send flowers. A beautiful arrangement, the biggest one they have. And maybe a donation in your father's name to his favorite charity." What was it he cared about? The veterans organization? He cared about me. I wanted to scream. He cared about seeing his daughter one last time before he died, and I was not there because I was smiling at strangers who do not even remember my name. But I did not scream. I did not argue. I just nodded and let Marcus make the arrangements. Let him decide what my grief would look like. Let him manage my loss the same way he managed everything else in our lives. The flowers were beautiful. The donation was generous. And I never got to say goodbye to my father. My college friends stopped calling after a while. Marcus found them provincial. That was his word for anyone who did not fit into his world of country clubs and charity galas. Provincial, unsophisticated, embarrassing. He never told me not to see them. He was too smart for that. Instead, he made it inconvenient. Every time I mentioned getting together with Sarah or Michelle or any of the women I had known since freshman year, he had a conflict. A dinner party we absolutely had to attend. A weekend trip he had already planned. A work event where my presence was essential. And when I did manage to see them, he made sure I knew how much I was sacrificing. "I had to cancel dinner with the Harringtons," he would say afterward, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Richard was not happy about it. He is an important contact, Jessica. I hope your girls' night was worth potentially damaging a relationship I have spent years building." It was never worth it. Nothing was ever worth the weight of his disappointment. So I stopped making plans, stopped returning calls, stopped being the person my friends remembered, until eventually they stopped remembering me at all. I stopped wearing bright colors because Marcus preferred me in neutrals. Cream, beige, navy, black. Nothing that drew attention. Nothing that made me stand out. "You are beautiful," he would say when I put on something muted and forgettable. elegant, sophisticated, not like those women who have to scream for attention. I told myself he was complimenting me, that he appreciated my subtlety, my restraint. I did not realize he was erasing me in plain sight. I stopped laughing too loudly because Marcus said it drew attention. I stopped having opinions about restaurants, movies, vacation destinations, anything at all because Marcus always knew better. I stopped being myself because the self I was becoming was so much easier for him to manage. I told myself this was compromise. This was marriage. This was what love looked like when you were lucky enough to marry a man like Marcus Whitmore. I was wrong about all of it. The night everything changed started like any other Thursday. I had a doctor's appointment that afternoon, just a routine checkup. Nothing special, nothing worth mentioning to Marcus, who did not like to hear about feminine concerns. But it turned out to be very special indeed. I sat on the examination table in one of those ridiculous paper gowns, waiting for the doctor to come back with my test results. I was not worried. I was never worried about my health. I was 34 years old, took care of myself as best I could, and had no family history of anything concerning. When Dr. Thompson walked back in, she was smiling. "Congratulations, Mrs. Whitmore. You are pregnant. About 8 weeks along." I stared at her. The words did not make sense. They rattled around in my head like loose coins, refusing to form a coherent meaning. "Pregnant," I repeated. "Yes." She showed me the test results, the numbers that meant nothing to me, the clinical proof of the impossible thing growing inside my body. "Based on your levels, I would estimate you conceived in mid-September. We will want to schedule an ultrasound to confirm the due date, but everything looks healthy so far." Pregnant. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 30 minutes, just staring at the ultrasound printout. That tiny smudge on the screen, that flutter of a heartbeat, so fast it looked like a hummingbird's wings. A baby. My baby. Our baby. For the first time in years, I felt something that was entirely mine. Something Marcus had not shaped or diminished or taken away. This life inside me was possibility. It was hope. It was a second chance at becoming the woman I had forgotten how to be. I imagined telling Marcus. Imagined his face lighting up with joy. We had talked about children in the early days of our marriage, before I understood that when Marcus talked about what we wanted, he really meant what he wanted. He had said he looked forward to having an heir someday, someone to carry on the Whitmore name. This baby could change everything. This baby could bring us back together, remind us both of what we had promised each other on that beach in Maui. This baby could save our marriage. I planned everything perfectly. Dinner reservations at Marcello's, Marcus's favorite restaurant, the one with the candlelit private room where he had closed some of his biggest deals. I wanted this night to feel special, significant, like a turning point. I bought tiny baby shoes at a boutique on the way home. Yellow because I did not know the gender yet. They were impossibly small, smaller than my palm, and I held them against my heart like a talisman. I rehearsed what I would say. I tried different versions out loud in the car, testing how each one sounded. "Marcus, I have something to tell you. Marcus, I have a surprise for you. Marcus, we are going to be parents." Every version sounded like a promise, like a prayer. I came home early to get ready. I wanted to look perfect. I wanted to wear something that made me feel beautiful, even if it was navy or cream or black. I wanted this moment to be perfect. I heard sounds from the bedroom before I reached the top of the stairs. Part of me knew, some survival instinct buried deep in my subconscious recognized those sounds for what they were. But my conscious mind refused to accept it. My feet kept moving. My hand reached for the doorknob. My eyes opened to a truth I could not unsee. Marcus was in our bed with Vanessa Blake. Vanessa was the vice president of marketing at Whitmore Development Group, 29 years old, ambitious in a way that showed in her sharp smile and sharper elbows, beautiful in that calculated way that made other women feel small, feel invisible, feel like temporary furniture waiting to be replaced. She had always looked at me like I was exactly that, temporary, an obstacle to be managed, until she could claim what was rightfully hers. I stood in the doorway, frozen. The baby shoes were still in my hand. The ultrasound photo was still in my purse. The future I had been imagining for the past 4 hours shattered around me like glass, the pieces too small and sharp to ever put back together. Marcus saw me first. He did not gasp or scramble or show any of the panic you might expect from a man caught in the act of betraying his wife. He simply stopped moving, looked at me with an expression that might have been annoyance, and sighed. "Well," he said, "this is not how I wanted you to find out." Vanessa did not bother to cover herself. She lay there in my sheets, the sheets I had picked out, the sheets I washed every week, because Marcus liked them crisp and fresh, and she looked at me with something like triumph. Marcus got out of bed, wrapped a robe around himself, and spoke to me like he was delivering a quarterly earnings report. Calm, measured, like this was a business matter that needed to be handled efficiently. "This is not how I wanted you to find out," he repeated. "But maybe it is better this way. I want a divorce, Jessica. I am in love with Vanessa. I should have married someone like her from the start, someone who matches my ambition. You were just comfortable, safe. But I do not want safe anymore. I want extraordinary." The baby shoes fell from my hand. They landed on the hardwood floor with a soft thump that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. Marcus did not even look at them. "I want you out by the end of the month," he continued. "My lawyers will be in touch about the details. I am sure we can handle this like adults." I stood there. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw things or demand explanations or beg him to reconsider. I just stood there, looking at the man I had given 6 years of my life to, the man I had shrunk myself to fit, the man who had just told me I was nothing special while his mistress lounged in my bed. Two truths collided in my mind with the force of a car crash. Truth number one, my husband was having an affair, had probably been having affairs for years. I was the last person to know what everyone else had probably suspected all along. Truth number two, I was carrying his child. I could have told him then. I could have screamed that I was pregnant, that he was throwing away not just a wife but a family. Maybe it would have changed something. Maybe he would have paused, reconsidered, remembered whatever it was that made him marry me in the first place. But I looked at Vanessa's smirk. I looked at the casual cruelty in my husband's eyes, and I realized something that saved my life. Marcus Whitmore did not deserve to know about this baby. Not yet. Not until I was ready. Not until I had a plan. "I am going to need more than a month," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, steady, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Marcus blinked, clearly expecting tears, begging, the performance of devastation he had probably been rehearsing how to handle. "Fine," he said slowly. 6 weeks. "But I want you gone by then, Jessica. Vanessa and I have plans." I picked up the baby shoes. I walked out of the bedroom. I walked down the stairs, out the front door, and into my car. Then I drove to a parking lot 3 miles away and cried until I could not breathe. That night, alone in a hotel room I paid for with my own credit card, I made a decision that would change everything. I would not tell Marcus about the baby. I would not beg him to stay. I would not give him the satisfaction of watching me shatter into pieces. I had 9 months to prepare, 9 months to plan. And when I finally faced him again, I would not be the woman he had erased. I would be someone entirely new. The next 9 months were the hardest and most transformative of my life. While Marcus believed I was somewhere quietly processing the divorce, licking my wounds, accepting my fate as just another woman he had discarded, I was actually building an arsenal. It started small. I documented everything I could access about Whitmore Development Group. Financial records that passed through my hands during our marriage, email correspondence, Marcus had carelessly left open on shared devices, suspicious transactions that did not quite add up. I did not know exactly what I was looking for, but some instinct told me that a man who could lie so easily to his wife, who could look me in the eye every day for 6 years while betraying me in ways I was only beginning to understand, was probably lying to other people too. Powerful men do not become powerful through honesty. They become powerful through leverage. I needed leverage. I moved into a small apartment in a neighborhood Marcus would never visit. It was on the other side of the city, in a building that catered to young professionals and graduate students. My neighbors were 20-somethings with loud music and optimistic dreams. I was 34 years old, pregnant with a billionaire's secret baby, and plotting the downfall of everyone who had ever underestimated me. We made an interesting combination. I took a leave of absence from work, telling everyone I was focusing on myself after a difficult separation. My boss was sympathetic. She had never liked Marcus, had seen something in him that I refused to acknowledge. "Take all the time you need," she said. "Your job will be here when you are ready." I wondered if she knew how ready I was becoming. Marcus never checked on me, not once in 9 months. He was too busy planning his new life with Vanessa, too intoxicated by the freedom of having shed his boring provincial wife. I followed their engagement announcement in the society pages. The photo showed them at some charity gala. Vanessa's hand positioned to show off that obscene 6-carat ring. The caption described them as one of the city's most dynamic power couples. I cut out the article and pinned it to my refrigerator. Every morning, I looked at their smug faces while I ate breakfast. Every morning, I reminded myself why I was doing this. The pregnancy changed me in ways I did not expect. Growing a life inside my body made me fiercely protective in a way I had never been before. This child would not grow up watching her mother disappear. This child would not learn that love meant erasing yourself to make someone else comfortable. I started reading books about divorce law, about financial abuse, about the tactics wealthy spouses use to destroy their partners in court. I learned about hiding assets and manipulating custody and using children as weapons. I learned what I was up against, and I started making connections. A support group for women going through difficult divorces, a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations, a network of survivors who understood exactly what it meant to escape a marriage that had slowly suffocated everything you used to be. These women saved me, not through grand gestures, but through small kindnesses, through sharing their stories and listening to mine, through reminding me, on the days when I felt most alone, that I was not the first woman to face this and I would not be the last. I started seeing an attorney named Claire Harrison. She had a reputation for taking on powerful men and winning. The first time I walked into her office, she looked at me with eyes that had seen everything. "Tell me your story," she said, "and do not leave anything out." So I told her. About the promotion I turned down, about my father's funeral, about the friends I lost and the colors I stopped wearing and the laugh I learned to swallow, about the affair, about the pregnancy, about the look on my husband's face when he told me I was just comfortable, just safe, just not enough. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You have been through hell," she finally said, "but you are still standing. That tells me everything I need to know about what you are capable of. Can you help me? I can try. But I need you to understand something. Marcus Whitmore is not just a wealthy man. He is a connected man. His family has been powerful in this city for 3 generations. They have judges in their pockets, politicians who owe them favors, an entire system designed to protect people like them from people like us. I know, if we go up against him, it will not be a fair fight. They will come at you with everything they have. They will try to destroy you, and they might succeed." I put my hand on my belly. At 6 months pregnant, the baby was moving constantly, a reminder of what I was fighting for. "They have already tried to destroy me," I said. 6 years of marriage to that man nearly erased me completely. But I'm still here, and I'm not going away. Claire smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who recognized the fighter when she saw one. Good, she said. Then let us begin. The months that followed were a blur of preparation. I gathered documents. I made copies. I created backup after backup, storing evidence in safe deposit boxes and encrypted cloud drives and the homes of trusted friends. I learned things about Whitmore development that made my stomach turn. Falsified environmental reports, bribes to city officials, contracts awarded through corruption rather than merit, a pattern of destroying anyone who threatened to expose the truth. I was not the first woman Marcos had discarded. I was not the first person the Whitmore family had tried to erase. But I was determined to be the last. Emma was born on a Tuesday in March, 6 weeks before my due date. The labor was long and difficult, and I spent most of it alone. My mother had not spoken to me since I refused to reconcile with Marcos. My brother had sided with my mother, as he always did. I had no one to hold my hand, no one to tell me I was doing well, no one to welcome this new life into the world. Just me and the nurses, and the fierce determination to survive. She came into the world screaming, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and her father's eyes looking up at me from the hospital bassinet. I cried when I saw those eyes, not from sadness, but from fierce, overwhelming love. This perfect little person, this tiny human who had no idea about the chaos surrounding her arrival. She deserved better than the mess her parents had made. I named her Emma. It means whole, complete, everything I wanted her to be. I swore to her that night, in the quiet of the recovery room, that I would give her the life she deserved, that I would fight for her, that I would never let anyone make her feel small or invisible or not enough. And I swore that I would make her father pay for every moment of pain he had caused us. 4 weeks later, I was ready. Sterling & Associates law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, original artwork on the walls, every detail designed to intimidate anyone who was not already rich. I had dressed carefully that morning. A simple navy dress that hid the fact that my body was still recovering from childbirth. Comfortable flats because my fat still swelled by afternoon. Minimal makeup because I wanted them to see my face clearly. I wanted them to see exactly who they were dealing with. The receptionist looked at me with barely concealed disdain when I walked in, carrying a baby carrier. "You must be Mrs. Whitmore," she said. "They are waiting for you in conference room A." She did not offer to help me with the door. I did not need her help. Marcos arrived first, of course. He was wearing a $4,000 suit and the confidence of a man who had never lost anything he did not choose to throw away. His legal team flanked him like an army. 3 attorneys who billed $1,200 an hour each, plus paralegals and assistants, and all the support staff that money could buy. And beside him, naturally, was Vanessa. She wore a crimson-red dress, deliberately provocative, as if she wanted to make absolutely sure I knew she had won. The dress was cut low in the front and high on the thigh, the kind of outfit you wear when you want everyone in the room to look at you and no one else. On her finger, that massive engagement ring caught every light in the room. She touched it constantly, adjusting it, admiring it, making sure everyone noticed. They were all smiling when I walked in. This was supposed to be a victory lap, a formality, a chance for Marcos to watch his boring ex-wife sign away whatever scraps he had decided to leave her. The door opened. I stepped through, and I watched 3 years of careful planning pay off in a single moment. Marcos saw me first. His expression was smug, confident, the look of a man who had already won and was just here to collect his prize. Then he saw the baby carrier in my hand. Time stopped. His face went white. Not pink, not pale, white, like all the blood had drained from his body in a single instant. Like he had seen a ghost, except this ghost was very much alive and sleeping peacefully in a car seat. Vanessa's smug smile cracked. Her hand, the one with that ridiculous ring, dropped to her lap as if the weight of it had suddenly become unbearable. Her eyes went wide, and for a moment, she looked like what she really was, a 29-year-old woman who had just realized she might not have won after all. The attorneys exchanged panicked glances. Nobody had prepared them for this. Nobody had even imagined this possibility. They had planned for tears, for anger, for desperate negotiation. They had not planned for a 4-week-old baby. Emma slept peacefully in her carrier, completely unaware that she had just detonated a bomb in the middle of a conference room full of expensive lawyers. "I apologize for any delay," I said. My voice was steady as steel. Remarkable, considering my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Emma needed to eat before we started. She is only 4 weeks old, and her schedule is quite demanding. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. For what might have been the first time in his entire privileged life, he had no script, no polished response, no carefully rehearsed deflection. "Jessica," he finally managed. "What? When? Why did you not? Why did I not tell you?" I met his eyes without flinching. "I was planning to, actually. I made dinner reservations at Marcello's for the exact evening you came home and informed me you were in love with Vanessa and wanted a divorce. I reached into my bag and pulled out the tiny yellow baby shoes, the same ones that had fallen from my hand 9 months ago. I placed them on the polished conference table, right in the center, where everyone could see them. I was going to give you these," I continued, "but you were too busy destroying our marriage to notice." The silence in that room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard hearts breaking. Vanessa stared at the baby, at the shoes, at Marcus's devastated face, and for the first time, I saw something other than smug confidence in her expression. I saw fear. Because Marcus was not looking at her. He was looking at me, at Emma, at the life he had thrown away without even knowing what he was discarding. And in that moment, Vanessa realized something that would haunt her for years to come. Marcus was not over Jessica. He was obsessed with control, and Jessica had just proven she was beyond his control. The woman Vanessa had replaced was not broken. She was winning. "Marcus," Vanessa said. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Marcus, look at me." He did not. Is that really your baby?" His voice was barely a whisper. Gone was the confident billionaire. In his place was a man confronting a truth he had never imagined. "Her name is Emma." I kept my tone factual, almost clinical. "She has your eyes, but do not worry. She will not have your character. I will make sure of that." Something snapped in Marcus then. All those months of confident planning, all that carefully crafted image management, the smug certainty of victory, it all crumbled because of a 4-week-old baby who was doing nothing more than sleeping peacefully. "You hid this from me," he shouted. His voice echoed off the marble walls, the crystal fixtures, all that expensive material that suddenly seemed very fragile. "You had no right to keep my child a secret. I will sue you for parental alienation. I will take her from you. I will." "Mr. Whitmore," his late attorney grabbed his arm. "Please, sit down. You are not helping yourself." But Marcus was beyond reason, beyond strategy, beyond anything except raw, wounded pride. "This is my child," he continued, ignoring his attorney completely. "You do not get to make decisions about my child without my permission." I remained perfectly still, perfectly calm. The calmer I stayed, the more unhinged he appeared. This was the Marcus I had married, I realized. This was the man behind the polished exterior. I had just never seen him lose control before. "I did not make any decisions about your child, Marcus. I made decisions about my daughter. There is a difference." Vanessa stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against the marble floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Marcus, we should go. This is not productive." The way he turned on her made everyone in the room flinch. "Sit down, Vanessa." Cold, commanding. The same tone I had heard for 6 years. The tone that preceded every subtle diminishment, every careful erosion of self-worth. Vanessa sat, but something in her eyes had changed. She was finally seeing what I had seen on that terrible Thursday night 9 months ago. This was not a man who loved her. This was a man who collected women like trophies and discarded them when they no longer served his ego. I wondered how long it would take her to understand that she was not special either, that she was just the next one in a line that stretched back years and would probably continue long after she was gone. My attorney, Claire, cleared her throat. Perhaps we should take a 15-minute recess. Allow everyone to collect themselves. I think that is an excellent idea, I agreed. I picked up Emma's carrier and walked out of the conference room with my head held high. In the bathroom, I finally let myself breathe. I had done it. I had walked into that room with nothing but my daughter and my dignity, and I had watched Marcus Whitmore completely lose control of himself and the narrative he had been crafting for months. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was not the same woman who had stood frozen in a bedroom doorway 9 months ago. She was harder, stronger, ready. I thought that was my victory. I thought the look on his face, the crack in Vanessa's armor, the chaos I had unleashed. I thought that was the moment I won. I was so naive. Because Marcus Whitmore did not just lose, he destroyed. And I was about to learn that the man I had married was only the face of something much, much worse. 48 hours after the divorce meeting, my life began to collapse. It started with a phone call from my bank at 7:30 in the morning. I was feeding Emma, still half asleep from a night of interrupted rest, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Sarah Miller from First National Bank. I am calling to inform you that all joint accounts in your name have been frozen pending investigation of potential fraud. I set Emma down carefully, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. Frozen? What do you mean frozen? What fraud? I am not able to provide details about the investigation at this time. You will receive official documentation within 5 to 7 business days. In the meantime, you will not be able to access any funds in these accounts. I have a newborn baby, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I need to buy groceries. I need to buy diapers. How am I supposed to take care of my daughter if I cannot access my own money? I understand this is difficult, Mrs. Whitmore. The representative's voice was sympathetic but unhelpful. I would suggest contacting your attorney for guidance on how to proceed. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, trying to understand what was happening. Joint accounts frozen. Fraud investigation. 5 to 7 business days. Marcus. This had Marcus written all over it. I called Claire immediately. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I called again. Same result. A cold feeling began to spread through my chest. I tried Claire's office number. A recording informed me that the office was currently closed and to leave a message. I drove to her office. Emma strapped into her car seat in the back. The parking lot was empty. A note taped to the front door read simply, "Closed until further notice." I stood there staring at that note for what felt like hours. Emma starting to fuss in her carrier, the November wind cutting through my coat. My attorney had vanished, threatened, bought off, or both. I would probably never know which. I drove home in a daze, trying to figure out my next move, trying not to panic while my 4-week-old daughter cooed softly in the back seat. The process server was waiting at my apartment building. He was a young man, barely out of college, with an apologetic expression that did nothing to soften the blow of the envelope he handed me. "Miss Morgan, Jessica Morgan. Yes, you have been served." He walked away without another word. I opened the envelope standing in the hallway, Emma's carrier getting heavy in my other hand. Inside was a stack of legal documents filled with words that blurred together as I tried to read them. Eviction notice, 14 days to vacate. The building, it turned out, was owned by Whitmore Properties. A fact hidden behind 3 shell companies, a fact I had never known during the 8 months I had lived there. I had chosen this apartment specifically because it seemed so far removed from my old life with Marcus. But nothing was far enough from the Whitmores. I somehow got inside my apartment. Got Emma settled in her portable crib, fed her while my hands shook, changed her diaper while my mind raced through options that all seemed to lead nowhere. $847. That was how much cash I had in my wallet and my personal checking account. Marcus had not been able to freeze that one because it was in my name alone, opened years before we were married. Pata. $847 to survive on with a newborn baby. No attorney, no job since I was still on leave, and 14 days to find somewhere new to live. My phone rang. I saw my mother's name on the screen and nearly cried with relief. My mother and I had not been close since my father's funeral, but surely she would help me now. Surely she would put aside whatever anger she still held and help her daughter in her time of need. Mom, I answered. Mom, something terrible is happening. I need help. There was a pause, a long pause, that made the cold feeling in my chest spread even further. Jessica, my mother's voice was flat, emotionless. What have you done? What? Marcus called us this morning. He said you have been lying to everyone. He said you had an affair and that baby might not even be his. He said you have been stealing from his company. Your brother says he cannot be associated with this kind of scandal. He is up for partner at his firm, and this could ruin everything he has worked for. The words hit me like physical blows, each accusation more absurd than the last, yet delivered in my mother's voice with the certainty of established fact. Mom, none of that is true. Marcus is lying. He is the one who had an affair. He is the one who... Hitsa showed us documents, Jessica. My mother cut me off. Bank statements, emails. I do not know what is real anymore, but I know I raised you better than this. Your father would be so disappointed. Mom, please listen to me. I did not have an affair. I did not steal anything. Marcus is making all of this up to destroy me. Please, you have to believe me. I do not know what to believe. Her voice cracked slightly. But I do know that I cannot have this chaos in my life right now. Your brother's career, my standing in the community. Marcus said this could all go away if you would just cooperate with the divorce. Just sign the papers and move on, Jessica. Stop fighting a battle you cannot win. He's trying to take my daughter from me, I said. My voice was hollow. He wants custody of Emma. Maybe that would be for the best. My mother's words were a knife in my heart. You do not seem very stable right now, Jessica. And that baby deserves a stable home. The Whitmore family has resources you cannot provide. I could not respond. I could not breathe. I have to go, my mother said. Please do not contact us until this is resolved. If it can be resolved. The line went dead. I stood in my apartment, the apartment I was about to lose, holding the phone that had just delivered my mother's betrayal. My own family had turned against me based on lies my husband had told them. Lies they had believed without question, without even asking for my side of the story. That was the Whitmore way. Build a narrative. Control the information. Make sure your version of events reaches everyone first. By the time the truth came out, if it ever did, it would be too late. I was still standing there, frozen, when another knock came at the door. My body moved on autopilot. I opened the door. Another young man with another envelope with another apologetic expression. Miss Morgan? Jessica Morgan, yes. You have been served. This document was worse. So much worse. Marcus Whitmore was filing for emergency custody of Emma, citing my unstable housing situation, my history of deception in hiding the pregnancy, my potential criminal liability based on accusations he was fabricating, and my alienation of the child from her father. The hearing was in 72 hours. I read the document 3 times before the words finally sank in. He was trying to take my daughter. The man who had not known Emma existed until 2 days ago. The man who had spent 9 months planning his wedding to another woman while I grew his child. The man who had called me comfortable and safe and not enough. That man was now claiming I was an unfit mother and I had no attorney, no money, no family, no home. 72 hours to prepare for the most important fight of my life. I looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her portable crib. Those eyes, her father's eyes, were closed now. Her little chest rose and fell with each breath. Her fingers curled around nothing, dreaming whatever newborns dream about. She had no idea what was happening, no idea that the people who were supposed to protect her were tearing each other apart. No idea that her entire future was being decided by lawyers and judges and a father who did not even know her name until 2 days ago. I sank to the floor beside her crib and let myself cry. For my father, who would have believed me, who would have fought beside me, who would have told me I was strong enough to face anything. For my mother, who did not believe me, who had chosen to believe a man she barely knew over her own daughter, who had abandoned me when I needed her most. For the marriage I had wasted 6 years trying to make work. For the woman I used to be before Marcus Whitmore taught me how to disappear. I cried until there was nothing left, until my eyes were swollen and my throat was raw and my chest ached from the force of it all. Then I looked at my daughter again. She was still sleeping, still peaceful, still trusting that her mother would keep her safe. "I will not let him take you," I whispered. "I do not know how yet, but I will find a way. I promise you, baby girl. Mama will find a way." That night, I did something I had not done since I was a child. I prayed, not for a miracle, not for a rescue, not for someone to swoop in and fix everything. I prayed for strength, for clarity, for one person, just one person who would believe me. I did not know it yet, but that prayer was about to be answered. And the person who answered it had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. Safe Harbor. Women's Shelter occupied a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the city. From the outside, it looked like nothing special. A plain brick building with security cameras and a reinforced door, the kind of place you would drive past 1,000 times without noticing. But inside, it was clean, well organized, and staffed by people who understood exactly what kind of desperation drove women through their doors. I arrived with Emma and 2 suitcases. Everything I owned now fit in the back of my car. The rest, the furniture and clothes and memories of a different life, I had left behind. There was no time to sort through it, no money to store it, and no one to help me carry it. The intake process was thorough but gentle. A young woman with kind eyes asked me questions about my situation, my immediate needs, my safety concerns. She did not judge. She did not question. She simply wrote down my answer and assured me that I was in a safe place. They gave me a bed in a shared room with 2 other mothers and their children. It was small, barely enough space for the cot and Emma's portable crib. The sheets smelled like industrial laundry detergent. The window looked out over a parking lot. It was the most hopeful place I had been in months. That first night, I could not sleep. Emma fussed every few hours, and when she finally settled, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the shelter around me. Other babies crying, women talking in low voices, the occasional sob that was quickly muffled. These were my people now. Women who had lost everything. Women who were fighting to survive. Women who had been thrown away by men who had promised to love them. I was not special. I was not different. I was just one more story in a building full of stories. Somehow that was comforting. The intake coordinator came to see me the next morning. Her name was Diana Cole. She was 58 years old with grey hair, kind eyes, and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked like someone's grandmother, the kind who baked cookies and gave good advice and never raised her voice. But when she sat down across from me in her small office, I saw something else in her expression. Something sharp and watchful and waiting. "Tell me about your situation," she said. "Start from the beginning." So I told her about Marcus, about the affair, about the pregnancy I had hidden, and the divorce meeting where everything changed, about the frozen accounts and the eviction and the custody filing, about my mother's betrayal, about being completely alone. Diana listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked a question that changed everything. "Did you say Whitmore, as in Whitmore Development Group?" I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yes. My husband, my ex-husband, is Marcus Whitmore." Diana's face changed. Something old and hard surfaced behind those kind eyes, replacing the soft grandmotherly demeanor with something that looked almost like hunger. "Come with me," she said. "There is something you need to know." Her office was small but tidy. Photographs on the walls showed her at various charity events, always in the background, never seeking attention. A single plant sat on her desk, green and thriving despite the lack of natural light. Filing cabinets lined one wall, overflowing with papers and folders. She closed the door behind us and sat down across from me. Emma was starting to fuss, so I held her against my shoulder and patted her back while Diana gathered her thoughts. 15 years ago, she finally said, I was a forensic accountant, one of the best in the state if I am being honest. I had spent 20 years building my reputation, my expertise, my network of clients who trusted me implicitly. I was hired to audit Whitmore Development Group, a routine engagement. Or so I thought. They were applying for a major loan and the bank wanted an independent review of their financials before approving it. She paused and I saw old pain flicker across her features. I found fraud, massive fraud, money laundering through fake construction projects, bribes to city officials, tax evasion on a scale that should have sent people to prison for decades. The Whitmore family was not just bending the rules, they were breaking them systematically, arrogantly, without any concern for the consequences. I reported it to my firm. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought the system would work. I thought justice would prevail. What happened? Diana laughed, but there was no humor in it. The next week, I was fired for performance issues. Performance issues. After 20 years of exemplary work, suddenly I was incompetent. My professional license was revoked based on fabricated complaints. My husband, who worked for a Whitmore subsidiary, was pressured to divorce me. He chose his career over our marriage of 25 years. A lawsuit appeared out of nowhere, accusing me of stealing client information. She met my eyes, and I saw the depth of her pain, her rage, her determination. They destroyed me, she said quietly. Not just my career, my marriage, my reputation, my sense of who I was. William Whitmore Sr., Marcus's father, he's the one who really runs things. Marcus is just the face. William is the brain. And William does not just defeat his enemies, he erases them. I stared at her, my blood running cold. This was what awaited me. This was what the Whitmore family did to people who crossed them. Why are you telling me this? My voice was barely above a whisper. Diana opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. It was stuffed with papers, photographs, what looked like financial documents. She handled it carefully, almost reverently, like it contained something precious. Because I never stopped watching them, she said. For 15 years, I have been collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone brave enough to fight them. She slid the folder across the desk toward me. I think that someone might be you. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were financial documents showing ongoing fraud at Whitmore Development, records of bribes to city officials, evidence that Marcus and Vanessa had been artificially inflating property values to secure larger loans, a pattern stretching back years of destroying anyone who challenged the family, newspaper clippings about people whose careers had mysteriously collapsed, legal filings from lawsuits that had been settled quietly, photographs of meetings between William Whitmore Sr. and people who should not have been meeting with him. This is enough to hurt them, I said slowly. But is it enough to stop them? Not yet. Diana's voice was thoughtful, calculating. We need an insider, someone who can testify to what they have seen firsthand, someone who was inside the machine and escaped. Documents are powerful, but testimony is devastating. Where do we find someone like that? Diana smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had been playing a very long game and was finally ready to make their move. I have been watching, waiting, keeping track of everyone who has passed through Whitmore Development over the years. Most of them are too scared to talk. Most of them have too much to lose. But there is one person, someone who was fired 2 years ago after trying to report what she saw. Someone who was threatened into silence but never actually signed anything binding. Someone who might be angry enough and brave enough to help us. Her name is Megan Price, and I think it is time we paid her a visit. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. Diana and I worked together, combining her 15 years of accumulated evidence with my more recent observations. We created a timeline of the Whitmore family's crimes. We identified potential witnesses. We mapped out the network of corruption that spread outward from William Whitmore Sr. like a spider's web. And we found Megan Price. Megan was 31 years old and had been Vanessa Blake's executive assistant for 3 years. She had seen everything. The fraud, the bribes, the way Marcus and Vanessa laughed about stupid Jessica, who never suspected anything. When Megan tried to report what she had witnessed to human resources, Vanessa found out within hours. Someone in HR was loyal to the Whitmores, of course. Someone was always loyal to the Whitmores. Within a week, Megan was fired for theft of company property, a trumped-up charge based on fabricated evidence. Vanessa threatened to press criminal charges unless Megan signed a non-disclosure agreement and disappeared. But Vanessa made a mistake. In her arrogance, she had the agreement drafted too quickly. It was full of holes. It was not actually enforceable. And Megan never forgot what she had seen. She had been working as a temporary receptionist for 2 years, too scared to fight back, too traumatized to move on, until Diana found her. We met in a coffee shop far from downtown. Megan was a thin woman with nervous eyes and hands that trembled slightly around her coffee cup. She kept glancing at the door, checking for threats that might never come and might come any second. "I cannot do this," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You do not understand what they are capable of." Vanessa told me she would destroy my life if I ever talked. She meant it. "They already destroyed your life," I said quietly. I gestured around the coffee shop, at her cheap clothes and worn shoes and the fear that seemed to emanate from every pore. "They destroyed mine too, and Diana's. How many more women have to be erased before someone stops them?" Megan looked at Emma, who was awake now, looking around the coffee shop with the unfocused curiosity of a very young baby. "They are trying to take your baby. They are trying to take everything. They almost have." Long silence. Megan stared into her coffee cup like it contained answers instead of caffeine. "I still have access to the backup servers," she finally said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Vanessa never revoked my credentials. She probably forgot I even existed." My heart started beating faster. "What is on those servers?" "Everything." Megan looked up and I saw something new in her eyes. Something that looked almost like hope. Emails, financial records, internal communications, everything they have been trying to hide. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was stronger. "Recordings. Vanessa records every important conversation. She thinks it is protection, insurance in case someone ever turns on her. She does not realize it is evidence. Evidence of everything they have done." 3 nights later, Megan downloaded everything. Terabytes of data, years of crimes, files that would eventually bring down one of the most powerful families in the state, including recordings of Marcus and Vanessa discussing how to neutralize Jessica, including evidence that Marcus had known about my pregnancy all along. He had me followed. He knew, and he asked for the divorce anyway, including proof that every accusation against me had been fabricated from whole cloth. I sat in Diana's office, listening to my husband's voice, calm and casual, explaining how they would destroy me. "She will not fight back," he was saying on the recording. His voice was so familiar, yet I had never heard this coldness in it before. "She never fights back. That is what made her such a good wife for so long. She just takes whatever I give her and adjusts. By the time she realizes what is happening, it will be too late." Vanessa's laugh came through the speakers, high and cruel. "Poor boring Jessica. She never had a chance, did she? Never." I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking, but not with fear this time, with rage. He knew I whispered. He knew I was pregnant when he asked for the divorce. He planned this from the beginning. Diana put a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was strong and steady. Now we make him regret it. The emergency custody hearing took place on a gray Tuesday morning in a family courtroom that smelled like old wood and anxiety. Judge Patricia Wells presided. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She had a reputation for fairness, for actually listening to both sides before making decisions. That was all I could hope for. Diana had helped me find a new attorney, someone who was not afraid of the Whitmore name. Her name was Claire Harrison. She was 45 years old, with close-cropped gray hair and a reputation for taking down powerful men. Her sister had been destroyed by a wealthy ex-husband 10 years ago. Claire had been fighting ever since. Marcus arrived with his legal army, confident as ever. He had clearly recovered from the shock of discovering Emma's existence and had channeled that shock into righteous indignation about his rights as a father. Vanessa sat in the gallery, wearing another designer dress, another smug expression. She made sure I saw her when I walked in, made sure I saw the way she touched Marcus's arm, possessive and triumphant. Let her look, I thought. She has no idea what is coming. The hearing began with Marcus's attorneys presenting their case. Jessica Morgan was unstable. Jessica Morgan had hidden a pregnancy out of spite. Jessica Morgan was facing serious criminal allegations that made her unsuitable as a primary caregiver. They painted a picture of a woman unhinged by divorce, desperate and dangerous. They had experts and documents and all the trappings of a legitimate case. It was all lies, of course, but lies told confidently by expensive attorneys have a way of sounding like truth. Then it was our turn. Claire stood and began methodically dismantling everything Marcus's team had built. The criminal allegations? Fabricated. She held up a stack of documents. Here is documentation showing how the fraud accusations against my client were manufactured. These timestamps prove that the supposedly incriminating evidence was created after the divorce filing, not before. The unstable housing? A direct result of the Whitmores using shell company to evict Jessica from her apartment. Here are the corporate records showing the connection between Whitmore Properties and the building where my client was living. The hidden pregnancy. Let me play you a recording, Your Honor. The courtroom fell silent as Marcus's own voice filled the space. We have to accelerate the timeline. His voice was cold, calculating. Our source says Jessica had a doctor's appointment yesterday. The kind of doctor you see when you might be expecting. That was Marcus. 3 days before he asked me for a divorce. 3 days before he told me I was not enough. Vanessa's response came next. So what do you want to do? Call off the engagement until you know for sure? No. We proceed as planned. If she is pregnant, that actually makes things easier. Single pregnant woman, unstable emotionally. Much easier to paint as unfit later. We just have to make sure we control the narrative from the beginning. Claire stopped the recording. Your Honor, not only did Marcus Whitmore know about the pregnancy before filing for divorce, he actively strategized about how to use it against my client. These are not the actions of a concerned father. These are the actions of a man trying to maintain control over a woman who has finally escaped his grasp. I did not look at Marcus. I did not need to. I could feel his fury from across the room, radiating like heat from a fire. Judge Wells was silent for a long moment, reviewing the documents Claire had submitted. Her expression was unreadable. Then she spoke. I am denying the emergency custody petition. Miss Morgan will retain full custody of the minor child, Emma. Additionally, I am ordering a full investigation into the financial claims made against Miss Morgan. Until that investigation is complete, any attempts to modify custody will be denied. She looked directly at Marcus, and her voice was like ice. Mr. Whitmore, I do not know what kind of courtrooms you are used to operating in, but in my courtroom, the truth matters. I strongly suggest that you remember that going forward. Outside the courthouse, I let myself breathe for the first time in weeks. We did it, I said to Claire. We actually did it. She did not smile. Her phone was buzzing and as she looked at the screen, her expression darkened. Jessica, we need to talk. What is it? What is wrong? It was too easy. She was already walking toward her car, gesturing for me to follow. The Whitmores do not give up after one hearing. They regroup and come back harder. What do you mean? I mean that Marcus might be the one we see in court, but he is not the one making decisions. His father is, and William Whitmore Sr. has not even entered the fight yet. I thought about Diana's warnings, about William's reputation, about all the people he had destroyed over the decades. I thought winning in court meant winning the war. I thought the judge's ruling would protect us, but I had forgotten something critical. The Whitmores did not just have lawyers, they had judges, they had police, they had the entire system, and the man who really ran the family had not even started fighting yet. William Whitmore Sr. had been watching from the shadows since the beginning. He was 71 years old money, third generation wealth. He had built the Whitmore empire through ruthless tactics and an absolute willingness to destroy anyone who got in his way. Diana's career was just one of dozens he had ended over the decades. Some people he ruined financially, some he ruined socially, some simply disappeared from public life entirely, broken and afraid and too traumatized to ever fight back. His son's public humiliation at the custody hearing forced his hand. Marcus had always been a disappointment to him, more concerned with appearances than results. But family was family, and the Whitmore name had to be protected. William made 4 phone calls. The first was to the police commissioner, who owed him for a real estate deal that had saved the commissioner's brother from bankruptcy. The second was to the district attorney, whose campaign had been funded entirely by Whitmore money. The third and fourth were to judges who had received consulting fees over the years. One of them was Judge Harold Blackwood, who would become very important very soon. The machine started moving. I was at the shelter when the police arrived, 3 officers with a warrant for my arrest. Miss Morgan, Jessica Morgan? Yes, you need to come with us. The charges read like fiction. Embezzlement, wire fraud, theft of trade secrets, all supposedly committed during my final months at my old marketing job, evidence planted in company systems by someone William had paid. I tried to explain, tried to tell them this was fabricated, that they were making a mistake, but they had a warrant signed by a judge and my words meant nothing against official documents. They handcuffed me in front of Emma. My daughter was screaming, confused and terrified by the loud voices and strange people. A social worker had arrived, seemingly out of nowhere, ready to take custody of the baby I was no longer legally allowed to hold. I fought against the officers, pulled against the handcuffs so hard the metal cut into my skin, screamed my daughter's name until my throat was raw. No, she is my daughter. You cannot take her. Emma, ma'am, step back or you will be arrested for obstruction. Diana tried to intervene. She was pushed aside, warned that she would be arrested too if she did not cooperate. The last thing I heard before they put me in the car was Emma crying, reaching for me with her tiny hands, while a stranger carried her away. I spent 72 hours in a holding cell. They put me in isolation, supposedly for my own protection, but really to prevent me from communicating with anyone who might help. The cell was 8 feet by 10 feet. Concrete walls, metal bench, a toilet with no privacy. I did not know where my daughter was. I did not know if Claire had been notified. I did not know anything except the grey walls and the hard bench and the silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I thought about Emma constantly. Was she being fed? Was she being held? Did she know her mother was coming back for her? Did she think she had been abandoned? 4 weeks old. My baby was 4 weeks old, and I did not know where she was. On the second night, I started talking to her in my head. I told her about the life we would have together once this was over. I told her about the house we would live in with a big backyard and a swing set. I told her about the dog we would get, a golden retriever named something silly like Butterscotch. I told her I was coming back for her, that nothing would stop me, that I would tear down the entire world to get her back if I had to. I do not know if she heard me. I do not know if thoughts can travel through concrete and steel and all the miles between a mother and her child. But I like to think she did. They let me out on bail eventually. Claire had worked frantically to make it happen, calling in every favor she was owed, filing every motion she could think of. But the system was moving slowly, suspiciously slowly. The first thing I asked when I finally saw Claire was, "Where is Emma? Where is my daughter?" Claire's face told me everything before she spoke. Emergency foster care. Her voice was gentle, but the words were a knife. The court would not return a child to a mother facing felony charges. The placement is confidential until the criminal matter is resolved. She is 4 months old. She needs her mother. I know. I am working on it. But Jessica, there is more. There was so much more. The story had gone national. The Whitmore public relations machine was working overtime, feeding quotes to every outlet that would listen. Billionaire's ex-wife arrested for fraud. The headlines screamed. Baby placed in foster care. After mother's arrest, every story included anonymous sources close to the family describing me as unstable, vindictive, possibly suffering from postpartum psychosis. They painted a picture of a woman who had hidden a pregnancy out of spite, then fabricated evidence against her successful husband when her schemes failed. By the time I saw the coverage, the narrative was already set. In the court of public opinion, I'd already been convicted. Comments sections were filled with people calling me a gold digger, a psycho, a danger to my own child. People who had never met me, who knew nothing about my life except what Marcus's publicists had told them, had already decided I was guilty. The final blow came from my brother. Tyler called while I was sitting in Claire's office, still wearing the clothes I had been arrested in, still unable to process everything that had happened. Jess, his voice was tired, distant. "I cannot do this. I am up for partner at my firm. I cannot have this connected to me. Mom and I talked. We think it is best if you do not contact us until this is resolved. If it can be resolved, Tyler, I am innocent. I am being framed. Marcus and his father are doing this to me. You know me. You know I would never steal anything." A pause. A sigh. The sound of someone who has already made up their mind. "That is what guilty people always say, Jess. I am sorry." The line went dead. I stared at Claire's phone. On her desk was a photograph of Emma from the hospital. 4 months old now. Probably scared. Probably crying for a mother who was not there. I reached the end of my rope. "I cannot do this anymore," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from very far away. "He wins. He always wins. His father, his money, his connections. I'm just nobody. I cannot fight this." Claire sat down beside me. She took my hands in hers and her grip was strong and steady. "You are not nobody," she said. "You are a mother who just had her child stolen by a corrupt system. And you are not alone. Diana has been fighting these people for 15 years. Megan risked everything to help you. I took your case because I believe in you. What can we possibly do? They control the courts. They control the police. They control everything. Not everything," Claire's voice hardened. "They do not control the FBI. And they do not control public opinion. There is one move left, Jessica, but it is going to require you to do something terrifying." "What?" "Go nuclear. Tell your story. All of it. Every document. Every recording. Every piece of evidence. Let the world see what the Whitmore family really is. They will destroy me. They are already trying to destroy you. The question is whether you go down fighting or go down silent." Claire leaned forward and her eyes were fierce. "Your daughter is going to grow up someday. What do you want her to know about her mother?" I looked at Emma's photograph. Those eyes. Her father's eyes, looking up at me from the glossy paper. "That she fought," I whispered. "That she never gave up. That she burned it all down rather than let them win. Then let us burn it down." The interview aired on a Thursday night. 60 minutes of primetime television, 20 million viewers. The host was someone I had watched for years, a journalist known for asking hard questions and not backing down from powerful people. I brought everything. The recordings of Marcos and Vanessa planning to neutralize me. Evidence that Marcos knew about my pregnancy before demanding divorce. Documentation of the fraud at Whitmore Development. Proof that the charges against me were fabricated. Records of payments to Judge Harold Blackwood and other officials. Diana and Megan appeared as witnesses, corroborating everything I said. Diana spoke about how William Whitmore had destroyed her career 15 years ago. She brought documents, photographs, the paper trail of her own destruction. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. Megan explained how she had been threatened and silenced after trying to report what she witnessed. She described the recordings she had downloaded, the evidence that proved everything I was saying. Her testimony was devastating. The host asked the question everyone was thinking. "Mrs. Morgan, why are you doing this? You are facing criminal charges. Going public could make things worse. The Whitmore family is extremely powerful. Why take this risk?" I looked directly into the camera. Because my daughter is in foster care right now. She is 4 months old and she is alone and she is scared. And the people who took her from me are the same people who have been destroying lives for decades. I took a breath. I am doing this because staying silent did not protect me. It has just made me easier to erase. So I am done being silent. I am done being erased. And I want my daughter back. There was a moment of silence in the studio. Even the camera operator seemed moved. The host cleared her throat. "You have made some very serious allegations tonight. Fraud, bribery, corruption at the highest levels. What happens if the Whitmores come after you?" I smiled, and it felt strange on my face, like wearing a mask that did not quite fit. "They have already come after me. They have taken my money, my home, my family, my reputation. They have taken my daughter. There is nothing left for them to take. Except your freedom," the host said quietly. "If these charges against you stick, you could go to prison." "If these charges stick," I said, "then the system is even more broken than thought." But I do not believe it is. I believe that when the truth comes out, and it will come out, the Whitmore family will finally face consequences for everything they have done. I looked into the camera again, knowing that Emma's foster family might be watching, knowing that Marcos and Vanessa were definitely watching, knowing that William Whitmore Sr. was watching. To my daughter Emma, if you ever see this someday, I want you to know that I fought for you. Every single day, I never stopped. And no matter what happens, I always will. The interview went viral. 80 million views in 72 hours. Hashtag Justice for Jessica started trending worldwide. Hashtag Whitmore Crimes appeared alongside it. And something remarkable happened. Other victims came forward. Former business partners Marcos had destroyed. Women William Whitmore had silenced over the years. Employees who had witnessed crimes and been too afraid to speak. One by one, they shared their stories. One by one, they added their voices to the chorus, demanding accountability. A former contractor described how the Whitmores had refused to pay for work completed, then sued him when he complained. He lost his business, his house, his marriage. A woman who had dated Marcos before me described how he had become obsessed when she tried to leave. She had to change her name and move across the country to escape him. A former Whitmore development accountant described the systematic fraud he had witnessed. He had tried to report it to authorities, but nothing ever happened. He always assumed the authorities were in on it. He was right. The FBI announced an official investigation into Whitmore Development Group. Federal agents raided the company headquarters 3 days after my interview aired. Marcus was taken in for questioning. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting every moment. Vanessa tried to flee to the Cayman Islands. She was stopped at the airport because her name had been added to a no-fly list. The footage of her being escorted back through the terminal, mascara running, designer bag clutched to her chest, became one of the most shared images of the year. I watched it on television in Diana's office. Watched this woman who had smirked at me from my own bed be forced to walk past a wall of cameras and questions she could not answer. It was not quite satisfaction I felt. It was more like relief. Relief that someone, finally, was facing consequences. The charges against me were dropped within 48 hours. The district attorney suddenly had concerns about the integrity of the evidence. No one believed the timing was coincidental. The family court ordered an emergency review of Emma's placement. Claire called with the news I had been dying to hear. Emma is coming home tomorrow. They are releasing her to your custody pending the final resolution of the case. I collapsed with relief. Literally fell to my knees in Diana's office and sobbed. It is over. It is finally over. Almost, Claire said carefully. There is still the custody case to finalize. But with Marcus under federal investigation, that should be. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Her face went pale. Jessica, Marcus made bail $10 million and there is an emergency motion filed in family court. What kind of motion? His father, William Whitmore Sr., he's petitioning for emergency custody of Emma. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I should have known. I should have remembered that Marcus was never the real enemy. He was just the weapon. The man who pulled the trigger had been watching from the shadows all along. And now he was stepping into the light. William Whitmore Sr.'s petition was elegant in its cruelty. He argued that Marcus was temporarily incapacitated by the legal proceedings and unable to fulfill his parental duties. He argued that I was demonstrably unstable and had weaponized media attention against my own family. He argued that Emma deserved the stability of the Whitmore family home. As her grandfather, he claimed standing to petition for custody. His attorneys were even more expensive than Marcus's. His connections ran even deeper into the machinery of power. The first sign of trouble came when the custody case was reassigned. Judge Patricia Wells, the fair judge who had ruled in my favor at the emergency hearing, was removed from the case due to scheduling conflicts. Her replacement was Judge Harold Blackwood. The same Judge Harold Blackwood who had received payments from William Whitmore for 12 years. The same Judge Harold Blackwood whose financial records Megan had downloaded from the company servers. Claire filed an emergency motion for recusal, citing the clear conflict of interest. It was denied. Of course it was denied. The system was designed to protect people like the Whitmores. We walked into that courtroom knowing the deck was stacked against us, knowing that no matter how strong our evidence was, the judge had already made his decision. But we had to try. We had to fight. We had to show Emma, someday when she was old enough to understand, that her mother never gave up. William Whitmore Sr. sat in the front row, looking every inch the distinguished patriarch. Grey hair perfectly styled, bespoke suit worth more than most people's cars, the face of respectable wealth. He did not look at me. I was beneath his notice. I was just another obstacle to be removed. His attorneys presented their case methodically. Jessica Morgan's erratic behavior in going to the media showed poor judgment and a willingness to prioritize her own vendetta over her child's well-being. Her unstable housing situation at a women's shelter demonstrated her inability to provide a proper home. The criminal allegations that, even though dropped, cast a shadow over her fitness as a parent. Her vindictive campaign against the Whitmore family had created an unstable environment for the minor child. Then, they presented their secret weapon, a psychiatric evaluation. The psychiatrist took the stand with solemn authority. He was an older man with grey hair and an expensive suit, the kind of doctor who charged $500 an hour and said whatever his clients wanted to hear. Based on my evaluation, he said, Jessica Morgan shows signs of delusional thinking, paranoid ideation, and potential danger to her child. She demonstrates a pathological inability to accept responsibility for her actions, instead projecting blame onto others. In my professional opinion, she should not be granted primary custody until she has undergone extensive psychiatric treatment. Claire objected immediately. Your Honor, this psychiatrist was paid $75,000 by the Whitmore Family Foundation. His evaluation is compromised by an obvious conflict of interest. Judge Blackwood did not even pause. Overruled. The hearing continued. Every piece of evidence we presented was dismissed or minimized. Every objection Claire raised was overruled. The outcome was decided before we ever walked through the door. I watched it happen. Watched the system that was supposed to protect children instead sell my daughter to the highest bidder. Finally, Judge Blackwood was ready to deliver his ruling. Given the serious allegations against Ms. Morgan, he began, his voice heavy, with false gravity, her documented mental instability, and the ongoing federal investigation that has created an unstable environment. I find that it is in the best interest of the minor child, Emma Morgan, to be placed in the temporary custody of her paternal grandfather, William Whitmore Sr., until such time as I was on my feet before I knew I was moving. No, the word came out of me like a bullet, like something that had been trapped inside for too long and could not be contained anymore. Your Honor, with all due respect, you are corrupt. You have taken money from William Whitmore for 12 years. I have documentation of every payment, every bribe, every case you have manipulated to benefit the people who own you. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, camera flashes from the media section. Miss Morgan, sit down or you will be held in contempt. Hold me in contempt. I do not care. You are stealing my daughter for a man who has destroyed dozens of lives. The whole world is going to know exactly what you are. Every payment, every deal, and every child you have sold to the highest bidder. Security moved toward me. Claire grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back. Jessica, stop. This is not the way. But I was beyond reason, beyond strategy. I had watched a corrupt judge sell my daughter to the highest bidder, and something inside me had finally snapped. You think you have won? I shouted at William Whitmore, who was watching with an expression of mild distaste. You think your money can buy everything? It cannot buy my silence. It cannot buy my surrender. And it cannot buy my daughter. Miss Morgan is held in contempt of court. Judge Blackwood's voice boomed. Bailiff, remove her from my courtroom. The child will be remanded to the custody of William Whitmore Sr. immediately. They dragged me out of that courtroom while I screamed for my daughter. Emma, Emma, I am coming back for you. I promise. I promise. Emma. The media footage showed everything. Me being pulled away by security. My face contorted with grief and rage. It looked exactly like what William wanted it to look like. An unstable woman being rightfully separated from her child. I had given them exactly what they needed. 24 hours later, I was released from contempt. I sat in Claire's office, hollow and empty. Emma was in William Whitmore's house now. The man who had destroyed Diana's life. The man who had ordered his son to destroy mine. That man was now responsible for my daughter. He took her. I said. My voice was flat, dead. He finally took her. And I helped him do it. I lost control in that courtroom and gave them exactly what they wanted. You were fighting for your daughter. And I lost. The door opened. Diana entered, and there was something strange in her expression. Not grief, not defeat. Something that looked almost like hope. Jessica, there is something you need to see. I cannot do anything else. It is over. It is not over. Diana put a hand on my shoulder. Megan just sent me something. Judge Blackwood's records, the payments, the dates, the cases he has manipulated over 12 years. Her voice hardened. It is not just you, Jessica. It is dozens of families. Dozens of children. And the federal investigators just received a copy. Claire sat up straighter. If we can prove Blackwood was corrupt when he issued that ruling, the ruling gets vacated, Diana finished, and William Whitmore's custody claim goes with it. I looked up. For the first time in days, I felt something stir in my chest. Not hope exactly, but the possibility of hope. How long? Days, maybe hours. The FBI is already moving on this. Judge Blackwood is about to have a very bad week. I thought I had lost everything. I thought the system was so broken, so bought, that there was no way to fight it. But corruption leaves a trail. And Judge Blackwood had been leaving trails for 12 years. Now those trails were leading straight to a federal prison. They arrested Judge Harold Blackwood at 6 in the morning. I watched it on television, like millions of other people across the country. Federal agents leading him out of his house in handcuffs, still wearing his bathrobe. His wife standing in the doorway with her hand over her mouth. The flash of cameras, the shouts of reporters. The charges were devastating. Judicial corruption, bribery, conspiracy to obstruct justice, wire fraud, money laundering. His arrests opened the floodgates. Every ruling he had made in the past 12 years was now under review, including the custody order for Emma Morgan. A federal judge intervened in my case within 48 hours. The Blackwood ruling was vacated immediately. Emma was ordered returned to her mother. I drove to the Whitmore estate with Claire, Diana, federal marshals, and a court order. The estate was everything I had expected. A massive property on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by walls and gates and all the trappings of old money. The main house was a Georgian mansion with white columns and perfectly manicured lawns. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, a prison disguised as a palace. The federal marshals approached the front door. I waited by the car, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. William Whitmore Sr. met them at the door. He looked older than he had in the courtroom, smaller, without his corrupt judges and his expensive attorneys and his network of powerful friends. He was just a 71-year-old man watching his empire crumble. "You think you have won," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse. "You have destroyed my family, my company, my legacy. For what? A child who will grow up with nothing." I did not respond to him. I walked past him into the house, following the federal marshals to where Emma was being cared for by a nanny. My daughter was 5 months old now. She had grown in the weeks since I had seen her last. Her hair was longer, darker. Her eyes were more focused. She was becoming a person, and I had missed it. When she saw my face, she reached for me with both hands, and I nearly collapsed with the force of my relief. I took her from the nanny's arms, held her against my chest, felt her heartbeat against mine. Then I turned back to William Whitmore. "She will grow up with me," I said. "She will grow up knowing that her mother fought for her, that her mother never gave up. That is not nothing, Mr. Whitmore. That is everything." I walked away without looking back. The trials stretched over the following months. One by one, the dominoes fell. Marcus Whitmore was convicted on 23 counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The recordings Megan had provided were devastating. His own voice describing his crimes in detail. His own words condemning him. He stood before the judge for sentencing wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of a designer suit. His hair was unkempt. His face was pale and drawn. 18 years in federal prison. Before they led him away, he saw me in the gallery. I was holding Emma. "Jessica," he said. "I never meant for." "Save it, Marcus," I said. "You had 6 years to be a husband, 9 months to be a father, and you spent every single day proving you were neither. Enjoy prison. I hear the accommodations are smaller than you are used to." Vanessa Blake took a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Marcus and William. She provided details about every scheme, every bribe, every victim. Her testimony filled in gaps that even Megan's recordings had not covered. 7 years in federal prison. I saw her at the courthouse the day she was sentenced. She looked nothing like the woman who had smirked at me from my own bed. Her platinum blonde hair was gone, replaced by mousy brown roots. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a prison jumpsuit. Her confidence had been replaced by fear. She did not look at me. She could not. William Whitmore Sr. was the biggest target. His network of corruption spanned decades. The FBI's investigation expanded to include City officials, real estate developers, 3 judges, and a sitting congressman. He was convicted on 31 counts. The prosecutor called him the most corrupt businessman in the state's history. 25 years in federal prison. At 71 years old, he would die behind bars. Judge Harold Blackwood was convicted on 47 counts of judicial corruption. His 12-year crime spree had destroyed hundreds of families. 15 years in federal prison. Diana testified at William's trial. After 15 years, she finally told her story in a courtroom. Every detail of how he had destroyed her career, her marriage, her reputation. The prosecutor asked why she had kept fighting for so long. Diana looked at me in the gallery. Because I knew someday someone would be brave enough to stand up, she said. Someone would refuse to be erased. I just had to be ready when she appeared. After the verdict, we embraced outside the courthouse. Thank you, I whispered. I could not have done this without you. You did the hard part, Diana said. Her eyes were bright with tears. You refused to disappear. I just helped you fight back. 3 years later, I stood at a podium in a conference hall filled with 2,000 women. Behind me hung a banner reading Rising Foundation National Survivors Summit. Advocates, survivors, attorneys, social workers. They had come from across the country to share resources, strategies, hope. 3 years ago, I began. I walked into a divorce hearing with a newborn baby and nothing else. My husband sat there with his mistress, waiting to watch me crumble. He expected me to beg, to cry, to disappear. I paused, looking out at all those faces. Instead, I looked him in the eye and showed him exactly what he had thrown away. Not just a wife, not just a mother, but a woman who would burn down every lie he ever built. Applause rippled through the hall. Today, the Rising Foundation has helped over 2,000 women escape financial abuse. We have provided legal support, emergency housing, job training. We have trained family court judges to recognize coercive control. We have changed laws in 12 states. I smiled. My daughter Emma is 3 years old now. Last week, she asked me why some mommies are sad. I told her that sometimes mommies forget how strong they are, and sometimes they just need someone to remind them. My voice caught. She looked at me very seriously and said, I will remind them, Mama. Standing ovation. Emma Morgan, age 3, knows nothing of the darkness that surrounded her birth. She knows that Mama works a lot, but always comes home for bedtime. She knows they live in a sunny apartment with a big window where she grows tomatoes in little pots. She knows that Grandma Diana, not her real grandma but close enough, brings cookies every Sunday. She knows the words to Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star, and the names of all her stuffed animals, and exactly how she likes her peanut butter sandwiches, cut into triangles with no crusts. She does not know about Marcus, about Vanessa, about the grandfather who tried to take her away. Someday, when she is older, I will tell her everything, but for now, she knows only this. She is loved, she is safe, and she is home. Marcus Whitmore sits in a federal prison cell in West Virginia. 8 feet by 10 feet, concrete walls, metal toilet. He has aged a decade in 3 years. The confident billionaire is gone, replaced by a grey-faced man who shuffles to meals and avoids eye contact. He keeps one photograph, Emma at 6 months old, a daughter he held exactly 7 times, a daughter who will be 21 when he gets out, if he lives that long. His mother stopped visiting after year 1. His father, in a prison 400 miles away, has never written. He has 15 years left to think about what he threw away. Vanessa Blake works in the prison laundry facility in Alderson, West Virginia. Her platinum blonde hair is gone, too expensive to maintain. Her natural mousy brown has grown in, streaked with gray at 32. The other inmates know her story. The woman who helped a billionaire destroy his pregnant wife. They do not let her forget. She received 1 letter in 3 years from her mother. Your father died of a heart attack when your case was on the news. Do not contact us when you get out. She has 4 years left. Nowhere to go when she is released. No one waiting for her. William Whitmore Sr. is in a maximum security facility in Pennsylvania. At 74, his health is failing. The empire he built over 5 decades is gone. Assets seized, companies dissolved, name disgraced. His wife divorced him. His country club friends pretend they never knew him. His political connections have evaporated. He spends his days in a wheelchair, staring at concrete walls, knowing he will never leave. The man who destroyed countless lives now has 22 years to contemplate his own destruction. He will not survive them. Judge Harold Blackwood was stripped of his license, his pension, his reputation. He lives in the same town where everyone remembers what he did. The grocery store, the church, his granddaughter's school. He is not in prison anymore. He got 8 years, served 3, paroled for good behavior. But freedom has not been kind. His wife stayed, but they sleep in separate rooms and speak only when necessary. His children do not visit. Some prisons do not have bars. Diana Cole runs the day-to-day operations of my foundation. At 61, she has a corner office with a window, a salary that lets her help her grandchildren with college, and a purpose that gets her out of bed every morning. After 15 years of waiting, she got justice. More importantly, she helped someone else get theirs. On her desk sits a framed photo of herself, me and Emma at the foundation's opening ceremony. Some stories take 15 years to finish. Hers was worth the wait. Megan Price lives in Denver now, far from the Whitmore shadow. She is the operations director for a non-profit that protects corporate whistleblowers. She is engaged to a firefighter named James, who knows everything about her past and loves her anyway. Last month, I sent her a card. You saved my daughter. You saved me. I will spend the rest of my life paying it forward. She keeps the card in her nightstand. On hard days, she reads it and remembers. Courage counts. Claire Harrison still practices law, but now she teaches too a seminar at Columbia. Power, abuse, and the legal system. I guest lecture once a year. The Whitmore case changed everything. Precedents were set, laws were rewritten, judges were trained differently. Claire's sister, the one who was destroyed by a wealthy ex-husband 10 years ago, finally got a letter of apology from her ex's attorney. It was not justice, but it was something. Some battles take a generation to win. Claire is still fighting. Evening light filters through the windows of my apartment. Emma's room is painted pale yellow, cheerful and warm. Bookshelves lined with picture books. A growth chart on the wall marking 3 years of getting taller. I sit on her bed, finishing our nightly ritual of 3 books. Goodnight Moon, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and a new one called She Persisted, about women who never gave up. Emma's eyes are heavy. She clutches her stuffed elephant, a gift from Diana. Mama? Yes, baby. Why do you help the sad mommies? I think about everything. The betrayal, the courtroom, the shelter, the moments I almost gave up, the moments I did not, because someone helped me once when I was very sad, and now it is my turn to help others. Was I there when you were sad? You were there, baby girl. You were the reason I stopped being sad. Emma considers this with 3-year-old gravity. I am glad I helped. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. I kiss her forehead, pull up the blanket, turn off the lamp. In the kitchen, a letter sits on the counter, forwarded from the prison system. Return address, Marcus Whitmore. I pick it up, feel its weight. 3 pages of whatever Marcus wants to say after 3 years. I do not open it. I walk to the sink, pull out a lighter and set the letter on fire. I watch his words turn to ash and wash down the drain. I do not need his apology. I do not need his explanation. I do not need anything from him ever again. I walk to my living room window. The city lights spread out below. I think about the woman who walked into that divorce hearing 3 years ago, terrified, alone, clutching a newborn baby. I think about Marcus's face going white, Vanessa's smile cracking. The moment that everything changed. I think about the women at my foundation. 2,000 stories, 2,000 survivors, 2,000 reasons to keep fighting. My phone buzzes. A text from Diana. Another record month. 147 new clients helped. You built this. I smile. Behind me, from Emma's room, I hear a small voice singing something tuneless and happy. A made-up song about elephants and stars. This is what victory sounds like. Not revenge, not anger, not the destruction of enemies. It sounds like a 3-year-old singing herself to sleep in a safe home with a mother who fought for her. He thought bringing his mistress to our divorce would destroy me. He thought showing me what he had chosen instead would break whatever was left. He was right about one thing. That day did destroy something. It destroyed the woman who believed she was not enough. The wife who shrank herself to fit his ego. Every lie I had ever told myself about what I deserved. But from those ashes, someone new was born. Someone who would fight. Someone who would win. Someone who would build a life worth living. Not because a man gave it to her, but because she built it herself. Brick by brick, tear by tear, day by day. Marcus Whitmore wanted to leave me with nothing. Instead, he left me with everything that matters. He walked into that conference room expecting to see a broken woman. He left in shock, and I walked out free. 1 in 4 women experience financial abuse in intimate relationships. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone. You are not powerless. And your story is not over. She arrived for the divorce with a newborn baby. He was there with his lover. He was left in shock. She was left with everything.